Right. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Shafi, for the invitation. It is my absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you today. We're going to be discussing the role of creativity and communication in the adoption and acceleration of healthcare technology. Okay, and healthcare innovation. My name is Vernon Bainton. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the Havas Links Group, and I'll hopefully explain why we should all be better storytellers. Okay, so by way of an introduction, a little bit of background for you. A very long time ago, before I knew much of the world, I was interested in art, and I still have a lifelong passion for art. And I was very interested in doing art, and I didn't know how to turn that into a job. Okay, and I also happened to be extremely nerdy and did sciences and maths A levels, and with very little career advice, went off to become a doctor. So I took a year out, like you guys did, an intercalated degree in neuropharmacology, qualified in medicine, and started working as a physician before swapping over into anesthetics because I wanted to be an intensivist. And about that sort of time, I fell in with some interestingly entrepreneurial, innovative medics and clinicians. One had been a serial device developer, so had been developing medical devices. Another one had been a venture capitalist in the US, and a third one had worked in consulting with industry, pharmaceutical companies. And through them, I'm transitioned away from clinical practice day to day into big pharma. So I worked for some pharmaceutical companies, and I worked in medical affairs and then some commercial roles as well, marketing. And what I came to learn through all of this was that actually I could put those two passions together. And fundamentally, whether it's a product, a service, a technology, a digital health innovation, a service redesign, doesn't matter. If you can't communicate really effectively with your end user or the person, so healthcare professionals prescribing or applying these things, or the patient that's going to actually be using them or engaging with them, or payers or policymakers, the health system within the health system, if you can't communicate with them effectively, it's for nothing. So I've worked in marketing, medical education, patient activation, health policy, all these different worlds in communications. And as I say, we help most of our clients internationally, globally, apply creativity to their healthcare problems. We help them market, educate clinicians around, so medical education to clinicians around their use. We help them and we help the payers understand how they're paying for things and their cost effectiveness. It allows us to work across a huge variety, and I'm very, very lucky in what I've done with my career, and many different therapy areas in different countries and different health systems. And just as a little snapshot to give you an idea of the sort of variety of work, it might be in the top left using real-time glucose monitoring. So you've seen this in for patients with type 1 diabetes, real-time glucose monitoring to help them better manage their blood glucose levels. I'm sure you've seen that. Or whether it's in the bottom left, there's a lovely picture there of some cancer cells being destroyed, immuno-oncology treatments, or precision medicine targeted cancer treatments. And I've launched a number of those in that therapy area. Or AI, machine learning, we talk about it everywhere, right? But using machine learning as a diagnostic tool to help radiography, to help radiologists get through the mountain of radiographs and help them better assess the likelihood of lung cancer. And look, over the last 2 years, everything has been impacted by COVID and the pandemic. For good and for bad, in good and bad ways. And we were lucky enough to be involved with launching one of the mRNA vaccines globally out of the US, and have had my fair share of working with vaccine hesitancy internationally and about persuading people to feel confident and comfortable and engage with the vaccine schedules. Now, in order to change behavior in healthcare, you can't just talk about it or tell people it's a good idea. You have to have the evidence to back it up. And we've lived with evidence-based medicines for a good couple of 100 years. But the trouble with it is there's so much evidence. And day after day, there are mountains of new data being published in the peer-reviewed space or preprint even now with COVID to rapidly get evidence out there. And evidence in and of itself doesn't change behaviors. It's the combination and context of that data to help clinicians understand where this new innovation, these new treatments, these new technologies can fit, right? And fundamentally, we don't think in terms of data, right? That's not how human beings work. Human beings work in terms of communication between each other in terms of stories. We've actually evolved to tell stories to each other. We know a few things about storytelling, right? We've done it for time immemorial, right? And that stories help us to understand and conceptualize and navigate the world, okay? They help us to remember things. You guys are all brilliant at remembering facts and figures because you've practiced for the last couple of years, and the way we study in medicine, we're all pretty good at it, right? But actually stories help us remember things 22 times better than facts alone. And in fact, a wonderful bit of research was done in 2008, Yuri Hansen's team at Princeton. They were looking at the relationship between a speaker, a storyteller, and their audience, the listener. Okay, and they use functional MRIs to scan people's brains whilst being exposed to stories and listening to a storyteller. And what they showed was fascinating. What they showed was that parts of the storyteller's brain, as they describe aspects of this story, light up, and the listener also lights up part of their brain at the same time. It's called reciprocal neuronal coupling. So what it means is when Shafi, for example, is describing to you some amazing new laparoscopic bit of surgical kit, he's talking about how he's using this tool, parts of his motor cortex will be lighting up. And when you're listening to him about how he's orientating himself with his track cards and his tools and his laparoscope, your brain will light up too. Or if I was to describe to you a scene where I was away in another country and had the evocative smell of a beautifully ripe mango, for example, parts of your sensory cortex would light up as I described the smell of this beautiful, wonderful, fresh fruit. Human beings have evolved to connect with each other around how we tell stories and communicate, because it's how we cooperate, and it's how we've become the most dominant species on this planet, right? It's not just our opposable thumbs, it's our ability to communicate abstract thoughts to each other and understand the world and what the world may be in the future. That's given us such an evolutionary advantage, and it's why stories matter. Okay, so how do we use them in our everyday work? Stories don't have to be really long. They don't have to be War and Peace. They don't have to be Harry Potter and eight different books. Stories can be really evocative with just a few words. Okay, and you've probably heard the saying, "The pen is mightier than the sword," and it absolutely is, because it allows people to be empowered and activated, and for them to cooperate, as they say, in groups. And here's a beautiful example of a writing tool that many writers have used, and we apply sometimes for our health technology products and services. It's called the 6-word story. And Ernest Hemingway, who I hope you know of as an author, wrote one: "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." A very evocative sentence, okay, that hopefully captures your imagination and raises questions. A couple of others that I particularly like, painful nerd kid, happy nerd adult. I mean, chimes with me if nobody else. Or if not, after Harvard had baby with crackhead. And Robin Templeton, the author of that. I've got a lot of questions for you, right? So you can be very, very evocative and grab people's attention, particularly in this world we live in at the moment, which is about short attention spans and needing to capture people's attention quickly and effectively and emotively, really succinctly. So here's a few ideas in terms of how communication and these sorts of tools, this sort of approach, has helped some very, very famous and very successful healthcare brands. Okay, so you'll probably be well aware of Johnson's baby shampoo. Okay, so gentle, there are no tears. What Johnson's did is they developed a formula of shampoo that had less adverse events. Okay, because bathing a small baby can be quite a stressful experience and quite unnerving and quite difficult, particularly when they've got stinging eyes. Okay, so they looked at the experience for the baby and for the parent whoever was bathing them, and they found that they could make a formulation that allowed to get good clean hair or whatever without stinging eyes. And they turned that into their USP, their unique selling proposition, right? That captures the imagination. No more tears. Okay. Januvia, you may be familiar with sitagliptin. It's one of the most well-used DPP-4 inhibitors when it came out, and it works in the incretin system, so the GLP system, and it blocks the enzyme DPP-4 to lower blood glucose, right? But it does so in a way where it doesn't produce as much hypoglycemia because it's glucose dependent. Okay, so the way to describe Januvia very succinctly, and it's quite functional, it's less emotive, but it's very functional. Incretin enhancer that physiologically regulates glucose. Okay, you understand immediately as a healthcare professional how it works, what it's doing, and what the benefit is. Okay, and why it's different to existing treatments at the time, which worked in a different way, and they had a lot of hypoglycemia associated with them, right? Like sulfonylureas, etc. The little blue pill, okay, Viagra is the most famous little blue pill on the planet. And Pfizer did a few things that were really interesting in terms of communication when they launched sildenafil, which is Viagra, okay? First of all, at the time, erectile dysfunction was called impotence, and there was a lot of stigma and shame associated with it. Men did not talk about it. Okay, so first of all, they tackled that by framing it as erectile dysfunction, which made it much less stigmatizing and has now become modern part. Is commonly far more commonly talked about. The other thing they did was they approached it from this potency and virility angle. So when they launched Viagra, they focused very much on the end user, the male with what was impotence or erectile dysfunction. And they said Viagra returns you, the individual you, to a virile state. Okay, it was very personal, it was very masculine, it was very one sort of single-minded. When Lilly and Sanofi came through with a competitor, which is called Cialis, works in the same mode of action, slightly longer half-life, they needed to differentiate themselves in a different way, and they needed to talk about erectile dysfunction in a different way, and they actually came at it from a completely different angle. They came at it from the fact that sex was an act of two people, right? It's a sexual act with two people, and therefore it was about a relationship. So they talk about Cialis as allowing physical connection with your lover. So they came at it from a far more intimacy relationship about both people, and they were able to then talk about Cialis in a slightly different way than Viagra. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea of how something like this tool can be used. And what I would do now normally, if we were together in a lecture theatre or in a forum, if we weren't in COVID and doing COVID times and doing this remotely, I would now ask you to describe yourself. or perhaps you could describe Shafi, or perhaps you could describe a service or a tool or something interesting or an innovation in health in 6 words. Okay, have a go at it. Every word counts, right? And mine, so you know, we've all got to do these things. So mine could be pathologically curious, according to my wife. You get the idea. Have a go, see what you think. Storytelling has been around forever, as I said earlier, and you may not directly know this guy unless you're a cinephile and love movies, or old movies particularly, but you will have been influenced or seen the influence of him with modern day films and modern day directors. This is Jean-Luc Godard, who is an iconic enfant terrible of French cinema. Very stylish, confrontational, political filmmaking, and he was the best of his generation, you know, ever, many times copied, right? And he said a story should always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Fair enough. But not necessarily in that order. So thinking about stories and their construction, right? The University of Vermont's Computational Story Laboratory, CSL, sort of place I'd like to hang out a lot, frankly. They applied cutting-edge technology and some machine learning and some smart analytics to understand the science behind storytelling. Okay, now this is not something particularly new or conceptually new. So you may have heard of Aristotle. In one of his seminal works in 335 BCE, Poetics, he looked at his contemporary storytellers, Odysseus, Homer, and he looked at the rudimentary components and the relationship between the stories and whether or not you could shape them and how do epics and tragedies play out. He also discussed at length debating. It was big in Rome back in the day at the Senate, right? And he talked about the need for ethos, pathos, and logos within debates, where you have to have purpose and capture people's minds and their imagination and their hearts, right? In 1985, Kurt Vonnegut, another modern day classic writer, did a thesis all about the shapes of stories. Okay, so Vermont's nerds, along with some computer experts, put tens of thousands of stories into a tool, and they basically started looking at similar patterns, the relationships between core actors and the denouement and different chapter structures of stories, right? And the exit and entry and all of these sorts of things of stories. And basically all literature, all fictional stories across cultures can be boiled down to approximately 6 story shapes, and you will be familiar with them all. Okay, so let's take you through what they look like. There is the classic rags to riches story. Okay, there is the success to failure to success man in a hole, person in a hole, I should say. There is the Cinderella. So rags to riches, to fall, to then come back and rise again. A tragedy, obviously the opposite of which is riches to rags. Okay, where you lose everything. There's the Icarus, the character that flew too close to the sun. His wings melted, made of wax, and they melted, and he falls down to earth. So it's the rise and fall. And then Oedipus, which is the opposite, the inverse of Cinderella's story. Classic mythology, fables, modern day stories, all of them adhere to one or other of these 6 story types. And so what we do in the work, when we start to conceptualize and develop narratives and stories around these, depending on the communication challenge for our clients, we apply them to their particular innovation. Okay, and we use, you can, whether it's the Cinderella story overlaid, we simplify it down to what we call the Havas mountain, the story, the narrative mountain. It's a simple story arc, and it consists of this opening, who's who, what's what, exposition. You've got some rising tension going on because there's a problem. Then you've got a climax point, falling action followed by some resolution. Okay, so being specific in terms of a health technology and innovation. There is an unmet need for patients, the health system, and healthcare professionals that are involved. What is that current situation? How does that situation manifest? Why does it matter? Why should we care? Okay. What is the potential benefit of a new solution? What is your new solution delivering? Okay, and to the patient, the healthcare system, or the healthcare professionals or the health system, and why should we care about doing something differently? And what is that call to action at the end? What is that next step that we're asking somebody to do? It's a very simple narrative arc, but it can help you organize your stories and get your story straight. Where might you need to get your story straight? Lots and lots of different places. Okay, so whether it's getting an idea across, whether it's engaging different healthcare professionals, different stakeholders in a potential new approach, whether it's pitching your ideas or your work, to introducing yourself, to applying it to case studies. We have a very structured approach, right, to tell case studies to each other. But can you use storytelling tools to help reinforce and help you learn aspects of key points in cases? Obviously, that has to be factually correct and credible and scientifically valid and medically useful. Presenting and speaking engagements and many other examples. Use that tool. Have a go with that tool. Think about the stories you're trying to tell. You do it all the time without thinking, but this is just applying some technique to what you already do, okay, in different ways. So that's some of the theory. Now I want to take you through 3 examples, 3 case studies of some things that I think are really innovative and exciting that I want to share with you and hopefully inspire you along the way as you move through the course and start thinking about your own ideas and innovations, okay? So the first one is in cancer, in oncology, and it's called MoveCare, okay? Now, it's a digital therapeutic, and I was lucky enough to attend ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology. It's the largest congress on the planet, one of the largest ones, with 30,000 attendees. And this was back in 2017. It's always in Chicago. And there was some phenomenally big breakthrough research being presented about personalized medicine, about immuno-oncology treatments, and about all sorts of things. But tucked away in a little side room was a digital innovation session. And the team in Grenoble and in California presented their research as a piece of primary research for this tool. And I thought, wow, there wasn't many people in the audience that were presented to. It was incredible. It blew my socks off. And I thought at the time it was a phenomenal idea. They needed to get their business plan sorted out and actually scale it. And I'm very pleased to say they've done that in the interim. So look, they were working in lung cancer. And as a disease, it has poor outcomes, okay? People can present quite late, and there's certain segments of patients that have very poor diagnosis, take a lot of time to get to diagnosis. But when you do get somebody with lung cancer, we have a certain standard approach, right? And particularly with advanced cancer, when they have metastases, they have spread, you tend to get them back regularly for CT scans, investigations, assessments at regular intervals, so you can organize your care, okay? And they said, there's a problem with this. They hypothesized that if the care team could better monitor patients in real time, or near real time, they had a much better way, much better chance, if you will, of detecting progression of the disease and able to intervene at an earlier stage, right? And that was their hypothesis. So they set up a randomized controlled trial using standard care at the time. So they didn't use different treatments. They just used standard care, okay? In one group, they just saw them regularly. And in the other group, and this was patients in their mid-60s with advanced cancer, and all they had to be able to do was to be able to use a cell phone, type into a diary, and have a carer that could do the same. And they gave them a tool to do that, a diary to capture symptoms, signs, concerns, mental health issues, how they were sleeping, how they were eating, how they were exercising, shortness of everything. They just said capture things. And they used a machine learning tool, again, an algorithm that helped parse this data and try and come up with an early warning system to detect change. Okay. This is the simple sort of schematic for that, whereby the clinician gave the patients this tool. Okay, it was an online tool, and their carer. They analysed the information that was being captured on a weekly basis, and basically flagged to a nurse if there was a change in status that might need assessing. Okay, all sorts of different things, and a nurse would ring them up, triage it, and then determine whether or not the patient needed to come in for care, reassessment, more investigations, or not. If it didn't flag the patient, they would leave them alone. Okay. And in the other arm of the trial, they just had standard of care, and they ran it as a prospective trial. And they ran this was in advanced lung cancer, so they ran it until death. Okay, so the overall survival was quite incredibly different. Okay, so after running this to completion in this trial, there was a 7.6 month survival difference in the arm where they had this real weekly or closer to real-time assessment tool, okay, and the algorithm working, versus the patients in the other arm that were just seen regularly in normal clinics. That is a phenomenal difference. It might not sound like that much, but let me just put that into context. At the same Congress, a new personalized treatment, a targeted kinase therapy was launched, okay, which is now, 5 years later, worth a little over $5 billion in sales, and is used for patients with a particular EGFR mutation, lung cancer mutation, non-small cell lung cancer mutation. And that that treatment gave about 18 months overall survival difference. So this system that didn't use a different treatment, that used exactly the same as everybody else got, already provided half as much overall survival as a brand new therapy. Okay, and there's more. It was cost saving to the health system because it only intervened and allowed resources to be focused on the patients that were progressing or might be progressing, and to not waste money and time and drag them in for scans, see them in clinic if they didn't need to. So the patients reported a better experience, the health system saved money, and patients had a better outcome survival. Fantastic piece of innovation, right? Incredible. Okay, second case study. So this is called Med Rhythms. And you know the Shakespeare quote, yeah, if music be the food of love, play on. Well, can music rehabilitate you? Can it be used in rehabilitation for motor problems after a stroke or a neurological disease? It's a rhetorical question, not a case study, so I expect you know the answer as being yes. But let's have a little look at this case study, and I'm hoping the video will play, and look at a chap who has had a stroke and is undergoing physiotherapy. He'd already had 3 weeks of traditional therapy, physical therapy, to get to this point where he's unsteady on his feet, and although with a walking cane and a physiotherapist, is able to walk, but quite slowly, and he was not very confident, okay? He had problems with his balance as well. So the team then applied what's called rhythmic auditory stimulation. They played in music at the right frequency to help the training. So this is the same person after one therapy session with a medical application of music to more effectively deliver physiotherapy. Spot the difference between this and this without pain. Incredible difference. So this system is now being used and evidence is being captured in a number of centres where it's being applied, and it's a really simple system. It uses a wearable device that has some accelerometers in it. It goes back to a smartphone based system, and you can pick and choose music at the right tempo in order to help with the physiotherapy session with your physiotherapist. Okay. How does it work and why does it work? You've experienced why this works yourselves. Anytime your toes tap or your hand on the steering wheel taps along with one of your favourite driving pieces of music, music playing in the background, or one of your favourite playlists is on. So there's a couple of things called entrainment and neuroplasticity that you may be aware of or not, but entrainment is where you get the synchronization of motor firing in line with rhythmic stimulation. So dancing, but as I say, you know this one, motor patterns fall in line with rhythmic stimulation. And then neuroplasticity is the wonderful thing in the brain whereby synapses, we prune and reinforce synapses based on the amount they are used. So the more activity neuronally that's happening in his motor cortex, in his basal ganglia, while that's happening, the more reinforced those synapses become. Hence the better motor pattern and the gait in just a very short space of time. Incredible, right? Here is what's called a product roadmap. It's a very simple one, and it goes from a simple minimum viable product, and that's how we approach some of these digital health technologies. They worked with some physiotherapists and some neurology centres to capture evidence clinically, evidence from the user experience and the patient experience, okay, and evidence back from the physiotherapist. And when they had a certain level of evidence, they got device status, they could then roll out and scale up that product. So that's something called a product roadmap, and it may be something that you use as you develop your ideas later on in the course, okay. And how good is that idea? Well, it's pretty phenomenal actually, and very effective. The thing is, with music, there's a copyright issue, right? So I don't know if you've heard of them, but Universal Music Group, so it's the largest music group on the planet, with Desert Island, EMI, Universal, all sorts of different record labels. They've done a partnership deal to allow millions of their tracks to be used by MedRhythms, so that the person doing the physiotherapy can pick and choose music that's most effective at the right tempo and the right pace. Incredible piece of innovation. Okay, case study 2. This is called Sick Beats. So can care become entertaining? Another rhetorical question for you. Let's have a little look at this one. This is another video that I'm going to play you now, and we'll talk it through and talk about it afterwards.
Having cystic fibrosis means that my lungs don't work as much and have a bunch of mucus in them. This is my airway clearance vest. It hits my chest over and over. And it loosens the mucus in my lungs so I can cough it out. Kids with CF, we have to do this all the time. Wearing the vest is the worst part of my day. I'm so excited my vest is here.
Turn up the volume.
Oh my goodness! It really works! That's cool.
There's a specific sound frequency, 40 hertz, that is proven as effective as traditional CF vest therapy. It loosens mucus so patients can cough it up.
Yep, that is working.
The Wooger Sick Beats vest syncs to your smartphone and pulls these frequencies from the music you're listening to, delivering them to the chest in real time.
It feels like my treatment.
The Sick Beats experience operates through Spotify. We scanned the millions of songs on Spotify to collect the songs containing the 40 hertz tone and gave the CF community dedicated access to the therapeutic song library simply by following the Sick Beats profile on Spotify. In the Spotify app, kids can access thousands of therapeutic songs and discover new playlists to make their CF treatment the best part of their day.
It feels like a big set of speakers. That feels so cool.
Fantastic. So hopefully you followed along. Sometimes the video audio on that video plays up, so I'm hoping you heard that all okay. But if not, I'll share it otherwise. But it's taking what was a torturous experience and turning it for children with cystic fibrosis and turning it into an enjoyable part of their day, if I can call it that, but radically re-engineering the patient experience by application of existing technology and really simple. There's this percussive vest that helps loosen the mucus at 40 hertz, and connecting it up to Spotify and some smart headphones allows kids to choose the genre, type and artist that they like. So it fundamentally changes their relationship with chronic ongoing care and management to something enjoyable. And that's the end of the talk. So thank you very much for listening. I'm just going to turn off and stop sharing that, and just say to you, look, please, if you've got any questions about anything we've discussed there, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My contact details are at the front, or Shafi has them anyway. I wish you all the best, and I will see a small group of you as a mentor for your project in the near future. And I wish you the best. Thank you once again. Bye bye.